Good evening, everyone.
Every dream is born from a passion. Every passion generates a mission. Every mission merits perpetuation. We understand this process linkage, created solutions for financial stability and management, built a company for your dreams' fulfillment. Spring Rain Global Consultancy Incorporated. Like rain during springtime, we nourish your dream that it be filled with life. We evaluate your financial capacity at the starting line. We improve your financial literacy over time. We generate your financial blueprint along the way. Help improve projects that are underway. Develop new strategies for financial balance to be attained. Find you, philanthropic partner.
Good evening, everyone. And also good morning and good afternoon to those who are joining us from other parts of the world via Facebook Live. Welcome to the third day of Spring Global's 45 Days Lenten Recollection, a Lenten journey of faith in the life of the saints. We are live every day for the next 45 days via Zoom and on Facebook page of Spring Rain Global. To ensure the solemnity of our recollection, may I request everyone to please keep your microphones on mute as you log in and for the whole duration of the program. Let us begin with our opening song, followed by the Spring Rain Global Prayer.
Oh beauty so new, late have I loved thee and feebly yet do. Though you were with me, I was not with you. Then you showed your face, and I was blind no more. My heart searches restlessly and finds no rest till it rests in thee. O seeker, you sought for me, your love has found me, I am taken by thee. I sought this world and chased its finer things, yet were these not in you, they would not have been. My ceaseless longing hid the deeper truth. In all my desirings, I was desiring you. My heart searches restlessly and finds no rest till it rests in thee. O seeker, you sought for me, your love has found me, I am taken by thee. fragrance I breathe. Oh, fount of life, you are forever the same. Oh, fire of love, come set me aflame. My heart searches restlessly and finds no rest till it rests in thee. Oh, seeker, you sought for me. Your love has found me. I am taken by thee. Your love has found me. I am taken by thee.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. The Spring Rain Global Prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity to be called in this noble endeavor of serving people and organizations through our thrust for a deeper love for humanity and stewardship of our giftedness. As we respond to this ministry each day, fill us with the power of the Holy Spirit, that your wisdom may enlighten us, that your strength may remind us to stay focused in our purpose and calling, that your light be our guide at all times, and that your love be in our hearts. We know that the journey may not always be easy, but we firmly believe and hold on to your promise that you will be with us both in our challenges and victories, as we bring love and unity to your people in service for others. We continue to pray that as we grow the mission and purpose of our Spring Rain Global family, we may be sustained by your grace, ready to open the path for others, so that your blessings and divine providence may completely flow to each and every one of us. May we always stay in your grace, now and forever. This we ask in Jesus' mighty name. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
We will now play the national anthems of the Philippines, US, and Singapore to signify the countries where Spring Rain Global is registered and operating.
Bayang mag-iiw, teras ng silanganan, adab ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, tuyan ka ng magiting, sa manlulubing, di ka pasisiing, sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong bughaw. May dilag ang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal, ang islap ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na naniningning, ang bituin at araw niya kailan tambay di magdidilim. Lupa ng araw ng walhati pagsinta, buhay ay langit sa amin mo. Aming ligaya na pag may mag-aakit ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright star through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Mari kita rakyat Singapura sama-sama menuju bahagia. Cita-cita kita yang mulia, berjaya Singapura. Marilah kita bersatu dengan semangat yang baru. Semua kita berseru, majulah Singapura, majulah Singapura. Marilah kita bersatu dengan semangat yang baru. Semua kita berseru, majulah Singapura, majulah Singapura.
Tonight's speaker will be guiding us in our reflection about the journey of faith in the life of Saint Augustine. We will be guided in our reflection by Father Richie Mercado, OSA, Advisory Board Member, Spring Rain Global. Father.
Right. Thank you, Pressa. Good evening to everyone.
You're welcome. Good evening.
So is it my turn now, Pressa?
Yes, Father.
Thanks. Just a second. All right. So I would assume that you all see the screen, right? The PowerPoint. So anyway, today we're going to talk about the life of our Holy Father, Saint Augustine. Now, for us Augustinians, who I would say Augustinians meaning those who belong to the Augustinian family, and I'm talking about the Augustinian friars, the Augustinian contemplative nuns, those communities that are canonically aggregated to the order, part of the order as a third order. Now, there are tons of them. The Augustinian sisters, like the divine love sisters, the Asok sisters, they are part of the order. So we are one big family. And for us Augustinians, I mean all of us, those who feel an affinity or a strong connection with Saint Augustine, his book, The Confessions, is an immense treasury for us, immense treasury of spiritual wisdom and personal encouragement. Now, there's always something that we can relate to in our life experiences about Augustine's story. In other words, we can still say the things that took place in Augustine's life, it also happens. It could also happen to me, or it happened to me so many times. And what we hear in this book, The Confessions, is that Augustine speaks to us of how God operates, how God continues to work as Augustine himself discovered God in his own life. So the book itself is not an easy book to read. And many people have been discouraged when they first pick up the book and read it. It's like reading the code of canon law. No, people get sleepy, people get bored. And it's the same thing with the confessions. And so let us keep in mind as we read and reflect on the words of Augustine in the Confessions, let us keep in mind two important things that would help us along the way. And first would be, let's read it slowly. Now, let's read it slowly, because Augustine was known for his intensity of expression, as well as the intensity of his experience. Now, in other words, like us, no, kagaya natin mga Pinoy, Augustine's life was also filled with drama. Now, there were a lot of dramas in Augustine's life. And frequently, one short line within the text will jump out of you and hit you. And you would say, that's right, no? And then you would further deepen your reflection on that certain line. And these short lines can be as important as the whole story of Augustine, as what we will learn tonight. So let's read it slowly. And then second thing that is important to remember is that remember that the Confessions, that this book is a prayer in itself. Now, it is a long prayer of praise and thanksgiving addressed to God that can help us recognize and respond to the loving God who continues to call us. Now, that's why Augustine uses the word you so many times, a lot of times in the Confessions, where Augustine is talking to God in prayer. You. Now, Augustine refers to God because he is talking to God. So the word confession, in this case, is not really a confession of sins, like we always think of immediately, where Augustine talks about his waywardness, but rather it is a confession. It is a profession of the greatness, a profession of the mercy, a profession of the love of God towards Augustine. And that is the real meaning of the title Confessions of Saint Augustine. So it's really Augustine telling people, no, if we've seen the trailer Confessions of a Shopaholic, not telling about the story of a shopaholic, this one is a confession of the story of Saint Augustine. You know, and that is what the confession means here. Now, there are so many things that we can reflect upon from the life of Augustine. But what we're going to focus on tonight is something that is very familiar to all of us about Augustine. And we are talking, or we will talk about his own conversion, Augustine's conversion. And what we're going to do here is that we will read and reflect together Book 8 of the Confessions. And from time to time, we will stop and dig deeper into the story of Augustine's conversion and how it relates to us today, 21st century Christians. All right, so you will not be hearing from my words, but we will be hearing from the words of our Holy Father Augustine himself through the Confessions. So the question first is, who was Augustine? Now, Augustine, let me click. Who was Augustine? Augustine was born in North Africa in the year 354 in a small town called Tagaste, which is found in modern-day Algeria. That's where Augustine is from. And then his mother, Monica was a very devout Catholic who spent much of her life praying for her wayward son, Augustine. His father Patricius was someone who was known to be someone who did not like to associate himself with any other religion. So he had no particular religious beliefs, but as Augustine would say, he was baptized on his deathbed. So really it was his mother Monica who really was the one who influenced Augustine's foundation in terms of our faith. So these are the parents of Augustine, Monica and Patricius, actually Saint Monica, Santa Monica. Now, as parents, They sent Augustine to school in Carthage, a place that was known to be a place that was known as the cesspool of Africa, a place that was very corrupt. Now, Monica's piece of advice to her son as he left home for school was that he should not commit fornication. He should not be having sexual relationships with people. And for Augustine, as a teenager at the time, this was such a womanish counsel. No, he would then say in the Confessions, I would have been embarrassed to obey my mother. Instead, I rushed headlong into disgraceful exploits. We can all relate to this, especially when our mothers start telling us what to do in life. Our mothers would start telling us, you should be doing this and you should stop doing that. And sometimes we would respond to our mothers, Mom, you just don't know what I'm going through. No, how can you understand my generation when in fact you are from a different generation? And exactly that's what Augustine did. He said, I would have been embarrassed to obey my mother, to obey her counsel. Instead, I would do whatever I wanted. And that's how Augustine responded to his mother. And so it's interesting because the height of Augustine's depravity, would be best described in the famous story about a pear tree. Augustine writes in the Confessions, there was a pear tree close to our own vineyard, heavily laden with fruit, which was not tempting either for its color or for its flavor. Now, late one night, a group of young scoundrels, and I among them, went to shake and rob this tree. We carried off a huge load of pears, not to eat ourselves, but to dump out to the hogs, after barely tasting some of them ourselves. Doing this pleased us all the more because it was forbidden. And such was my heart. I had no incentive to do this evil deed, but I did it for the evil itself. It was foul, and I loved it. A depraved soul seeking nothing from the shameful deed but shame itself. So such was the heart of the young Augustine. He stole pears regardless of the fact that he was not hungry and he did not like pears. Sometimes we fall into this trap. Now that we have to belong. We have to belong to a certain group. We have to belong to a certain group of friends in this case. So for Augustine, even though he knew that his friends were doing things that would disrupt the peace, the serenity of the society, he did it. But he did it so that he would be accepted by his friends. He did it for the evil deed itself, not because he wanted to achieve something, but really he just wanted to do it because he knew it was forbidden. And a lot of times we also fall into this trap. Now, how many times have we forced ourselves to do something that we know is bad for ourselves, for the people around us, and yet we still do it? We still did it because we were afraid to be rejected. No, we were afraid to be lonely. We were afraid, to be ridiculed by others because we don't want to do something that they ask us to do. Our friends was, peer pressure. This was exactly what Augustine experienced in his life. Now, as a student, Augustine proved to be excellent in Latin, in rhetoric and philosophy. Now, he was drawn into the works of a philosopher by the name Plato. He became an orator, a professional communicator, a public persuader, as long as the price was right or the prestige gain was worth the effort. The truth and rightness of the cause was irrelevant for Augustine. All that was important for him was knowing the techniques and the power of persuasion. And this was the line of work that Augustine was good at. You could relate in today's world, Augustine's work was really somewhat like a public persuader, an attorney, a lawyer. And he was good at that. Augustine was good at that. And so eventually his work, or this work, took Augustine to Rome and then to Milan. Yeah. And his mother, Monica, followed him to Milan, where there she persuaded Augustine to listen to the sermons of the Bishop of Milan, the great Ambrose. Now, before this happened, before Augustine left and sailed for Rome initially, Augustine was in a port in Africa with his mother. His mother knew something already, that something was up for Augustine. And so when Augustine visited the town in the port, the town where there was a port, Monica went with Augustine. And Augustine, while Monica was praying in the chapel, Augustine told his mother, "Ma, dito ka lang muna sa chapel, no? Stay here first and I'll just let my friend sail to Rome. I'll bid goodbye to my friend." And so Monica believed Augustine. And Augustine never came back. He himself sailed for Rome, leaving his mother looking for her son. No, nasan na yung anak ko? And that's one of the terrible deeds that Augustine did to his mother. But mother would never give up. She found out that Augustine was in Milan, and so she followed him to Milan. And then there, she persuaded Augustine to listen to the sermons of the Bishop of Milan, the great Ambrose. And so Augustine agreed to this, not because he cared about Christianity at the time, but rather he goes to hear Ambrose because he was interested in Ambrose's reputation as a good speaker, and thought that he might learn an oratorical technique or two by watching him. So really, the reason why Augustine did this was for his own personal gain. But God works in mysterious ways. God used Ambrose as an instrument on Augustine's conversion. So for us, a lot of times, we could also fall into this situation where we would be doing things, and yet that is not the reason why we do things are too shallow. It's not really the real reason why we do things. But God works in mysterious ways. Now, you might enter religious life for a different reason before. And then God works in mysterious ways. And that's why you're able to persevere. You're able to stay in community. You're able to stay in whatever you do in your ministries. Wrong reasons, when you look back, but God always works in mysterious ways. And that's what Augustine reminds us. And so Augustine writes in the Confessions, "I was contemptuous of the subject matter. My pleasure was in the charm of his language, and attentive only for his rhetorical technique. This was my empty concern. But by his words, I was beginning to enjoy the subject matter. Now, it began to make an entry into my mind. I could no longer separate the technique from the content. While I opened my heart in noting the eloquence with which he spoke, there also entered in the truth which he affirmed. Though only gradually against his own will, Augustine now found himself attracted to the message that Ambrose preached. So I hope when you go to Mass not because of the jokes of the priests, not because of the eloquence of the preacher. You go there for the message. But again, I still believe in the power and the mysterious ways of God. That, like Augustine, he was there to listen to the sermon of Ambrose, not for the message, but he was there to listen, to learn a technique on how to preach, on how to be a good speaker. And then gradually, the words of God started piercing Augustine's heart. I hope that the reason why we listen to the word of God, I hope that the reason why we attend this third Lenten journey with spring rain, you're joining this for the good reasons. So that you may be more attracted to the gospel message, the message of loving one another. And then, so Augustine reminds us that God has brought us here. We may be here for the wrong reasons, because someone else forced us to be here, but God really brought you here because of that person. Sorry, my alarm. Now, and at the suggestion of Ambrose, Augustine began to make a diligent study of the Bible, particularly the writings of St. Paul. And as Augustine read St. Paul, he felt that here was a man like himself. St. Paul had passed through a doubts. And he discovered in St. Paul that the ultimate reality in life was not an abstract Platonic idea, not things that are in our minds, but rather the ultimate reality in life was a living word, a living divine word that became man in Jesus Christ. So Augustine was now drawn, he was now attracted to the gospel of Jesus Christ. But his life was still enchained by his lust of the flesh. And so it is here that we pick up, or where we pick up Augustine's story of his conversion, as he himself tells it to us in Book 8 of the Confessions. Now, to give you a better picture of Augustine's conversion story, let us understand that Confessions is like a Russian doll. And what I mean by this is that if you would look at a Russian doll, now there's a big doll, and then inside the doll, there's another doll. And then inside that doll, there's another doll. No, it will become smaller and smaller. And what I mean by this is that Confessions is like this, that we have a long story, a big story, and then within the story, there's another story. And then within the story, there's another story. So there's a lot of stories within a story. So let me give you a brief synopsis about Augustine's conversion story, because there are several stories within Augustine's conversion story. And Augustine's conversion story begins with a visit to Simplicianus, the spiritual father of Ambrose, who tells Augustine the conversion story of Victorinus. Now, Victorinus was a gifted philosopher and a renowned orator whom Augustine would have known and respected. For example, if you are a lawyer, then you should know who are the prominent lawyers in the country, right? Who are the prominent judges in the country. Same thing here with Augustine. He knew Victorinus because Victorinus was a very gifted philosopher, a renowned orator, which is the line of work that Augustine was doing. And so Simplicianus told the conversion story of Victorinus. And then later, a friend named Pontitianus tells Augustine about the conversion story of a highly placed Roman official who served the emperor. And then both stories would convict Augustine deeply to follow their example. But the fact that Augustine cannot do it or will not do it throws Augustine himself into a turmoil that begins to tear his soul apart until God finally overwhelms Augustine and brings him to himself. So here we begin to hear Augustine recounting to God the story of his conversion to Jesus Christ. So remember, this is a prayer to God for us to hear. So it begins with the visit with or conversation with Simplicianus, talking about the conversion of Victorinus. So Augustine says, so I went to see Simplicianus, the spiritual father of Ambrose, whom he truly loved. I recounted to him all my wanderings. And when I mentioned to him that I had read certain books by Plato, translated into Latin by Victorinus, Simplicianus congratulated me for not falling upon the writings of other philosophers, which were full of fallacies and deceit. Then he told me about Victorinus himself, who had been a professor of rhetoric in Rome, that he died a Christian. So you could see now, this is like an MMK, maala-ala mo kaya. Augustine is now narrating to us his story. Simplicianus told me how this most learned, most skilled man in all the liberal arts, who had read, who had criticized, who had explained so many of the writings of the philosophers, the teacher of so many noble senators, one who, as a mark of his distinguished service in the office, had both merited and obtained a statue in the Roman Forum. This man, who up to an advanced age had been a worshiper of idols, a communicant in the sacrilegious rites to which almost all the nobility of Rome were wedded. All of this, old Victorinus had defended with thunder eloquence for so many years. And despite all this, he did not blush to become a child of Christ, bowing his neck to the yoke of humility and submitting his forehead to the shame of the cross. Simplicianus then told Augustine in detail the conversion story of Victorinus. Now, there's a lot of drama in this story that really moved Augustine to imitate him. But for the sake of this reflection tonight, I will not dig into the details of the story, but I would invite you to grab the book, The Confessions, and reread Book 8 of the Confessions so that you can see how this constant rubbing within Augustine's heart is the same as the constant rubbing within us when we are at the crossroads of life. Sometimes we are at the crossroads in life. Should I be doing this or should I leave this? In religious life, before we commit ourselves to a life, a perpetual life of commitment to our community, to the church, we are given a chance to renew our vows every year. The law provides us that provision to give us an opportunity to think deeper if this is really what we want. And always, we are at the crossroads of our lives as religious when we are at that point, should I renew my vows? Or should I leave this life that I love and explore somewhere else, a different kind of life? Or maybe in our relationships, not just in religious life. Should I be with this person for the rest of my life or not? Should I be doing this job for a longer period of time, or should I accept a new one, a new opportunity? And sometimes we feel this deep rubbing within us. Ano ba talaga gagawin ko? And this is what Augustine experienced in his life. And so Augustine prays to God, by what means, Lord, did you find your way to that heart? Now here is a man that had accomplished what Augustine wanted to do in his life. So Augustine prays, by what means, Lord, did you find his way? Did you find your way to the heart of Victorinus? Now, Lord, paano ka nakapunta sa puso ng isang tao who was known to be a worshiper of idols? Sometimes, Lord, bakit ka Bakit ka pa nakapunta doon sa buhay ng isang tao, sa isang masamang damo? And that's what Augustine was wondering, Lord, how did you find your way into the heart of Victorinus? And so Augustine was already praying to God as if he was asking God to find his way to Augustine's own heart. Lord, if you're able to find your way to that heart, find a way into my heart. And that's what Augustine really reminds us today. Not to pray for this, Lord, if you're able to find your way to the people that inspire me, priests, nuns, lay people, leaders in our society, Lord, if you're able to find your way into their hearts, find a way to my heart as well. And that's what Augustine was praying to God. And so Augustine continues to pray, O most merciful Father, you rejoice more over one sinner that repents than over 99 just persons that need no repentance. And we are moved to tears when we read about the younger son who was dead and is alive again, was lost and was found. So we know now that Augustine here is now connecting the dots, connecting the parables in the Gospels into his own life through the people around him. Sometimes we can also do that. Now, when the gospel message means something to us, we now connect the dots. Lord, kaya pala pinadala mo sa akin si Sister Margaret, no? Para pala makilala kita. No? Lord, kaya pala pinakilala mo sa akin si Father Victor para makapunta ako dito sa recollection so that I would know you deeper, especially in the season of Lent. So Augustine was now starting to connect the dots. And as a result of this, Augustine longs to imitate Victorinus, but is hindered by lustful habit. So he was torn. And so now let us listen to Augustine. Let us listen to him, what he has to say about this. Now, when Simplicianus finished telling me the story of Victorinus, I was eager to imitate him. But he went on to tell me how in the reign of the Emperor Julian, there was a law passed by which Christians were forbidden to teach literature and rhetoric. Victorinus, in obedience to the law, chose to abandon his school of words rather than stop teaching your holy word. He was happy about this because he had now found a reason to give his time completely to you. This is what I too long for. Sabi ni Augustine, Lord, ito rin ang gusto ko sa buhay ko. But the enemy held me in chain. I was bound by lust. And the service of lust ended in habit. And habit, not resisted, became necessity. These links forged the chain, a hard bondage that held me in slavery. But the new will, which had begun to spring up in me freely to worship you and to enjoy you, was not able as yet to overcome my current bondage. Thus, my two wills, the old and the new, the carnal and the spiritual, were in conflict within me. And by their discord, they tore my soul apart. No, parang, Augustine was having a breakdown. Lord, I already know what you want from me. Lord, but I still could not let it go. Now imagine what Augustine was going through. And I'm sure a lot of us have also gone through this. This circus of emotions, especially in our relationships. We know that our relationships could be toxic, and yet we want to stay. We know that it is not good for us, and yet we still know that we still feel that we can do something about it. And our souls are torn apart because of this constant rubbing, because of this drama within us. That's what Augustine felt. Now, there's nothing new with Augustine's experience compared to our experience. So Augustine's heart was in a turmoil. And so he says, I no longer had my accustomed excuse that I hesitated to forsake the world and serve you because my perception of the truth was uncertain. Lord, it was certain, I know you, but bound to the earth, I refused to be your soldier. I was more afraid of being free from all my sinful entanglements than I was being entangled with you. Now, we know that being close to God, being close to Christ, is the best path in life. And yet there are many things, the lures of the world, fame, riches. They would constantly remind us or ask us, do you really want to leave us? Do you really want to go to something that is uncertain? I am certain, and that's what the world teaches us, that money can give us certainty, that Christ could not give us certainty, that the world can give us fame. The Gospels could not give us fame. And Augustine was like, I was more afraid to be free or being free from all these sinful entanglements than I was being entangled with you. He said, Lord, who shall deliver me from this body of death except through your grace alone, through Jesus Christ our Lord? So you can see here now that Augustine is talking to God. He is praying to God just like us when we are carrying too much burden on our shoulders. Lord, kailan pa kaya makikinig sa akin yung anak ko? Lord, kailan pa kaya magsisimba uli itong asawa ko? That there's nothing different between Augustine's experience than what we also experience in our lives. So that was the first story that pushed Augustine to say yes to God. But still, he could not do it. He knew it was the right thing to do in life, but he just couldn't do it. And so Augustine sends his friend Pontesianus to remind Augustine that God's mercy is always greater than our failures, that God's mercy is much greater than our mistakes, that God's mercy is a lot bigger than our doubts in life. So Augustine says in his conversation with Pontesianus, now I will tell you how my Lord delivered me from the chain of sexual desire by which I was so tightly held and enslaved to the world. With increasing anxiety, I went about my usual affairs daily, citing about you. I was attending to your church as frequently as to my business. And one day, a fellow countryman from Africa named Pontesianus came to visit. He held high office in the emperor's court, and Alypius was with me. Alypius was Augustine's best friend. He was with him all this time in his journey. They were converted together. They lived in Augustine's first community in Tagaste. And eventually, Alypius also became a bishop like Augustine. And so Augustine continues to say, why he came, talking about Pontesianus, I don't recall, but we sat down and talked. And suddenly he noticed a book on my table. He took it up, opened it, and unexpectedly found it to be the book of the Apostle Paul. And I suppose he thought that it would be one of those wearisome books on rhetoric. And Pontesianus expressed his delight that he had so unexpectedly found this book lying before my eyes, for he was indeed a faithful Christian and prayed to you daily. And when I told him that I had given much attention to St. Paul's writings, a conversation followed in which he spoke of a highly respected Egyptian monk named Anthony, whom I was not familiar with. When he learned this, he lingered on the topic, giving us an account of this eminent man and marveling at our ignorance. And we in turn were amazed to hear your wonderful work so fully manifested in recent times, almost in our own, occurring in the true faith and the Catholic Church. And in here, Augustine reaches out to us, now reminding us that God continues to manifest his love, his mercy, even in our times, not just in the 4th century during Augustine's time, not just at the beginnings of the church, but the early Christian communities. Augustine reminds us that God continues to show to us his love, his mercy. And so Augustine continues. Pontitianus went on with his story, and we listened instantly in silence. We, meaning Augustine and Alypius. He told us how on a certain afternoon in Trier, when the emperor was watching games, he and 3 companions went out for a walk in the gardens, close to the city walls. And there, as they walked 2 by 2, one strolled away with Pontitianus, while the other 2 went on by themselves. As they rambled forward, these other 2 came upon a cottage where some of God's servants lived. And they found the book in which was written the life of Anthony. One of them began to read it and was inflamed by it. And by reading, he thought about embracing such a life, giving up his worldly employment to seek only you. These 2 people, or the 4, including Pontitianus, that these people belong to the group of officials commonly called in today's world as the Secret Service agents, the one who would protect the emperor, the one who would protect the president, in this case, the prime minister. And then suddenly, being overwhelmed with a holy love and a sober shame, and as if in anger with himself, he fixed his eyes on his friend, exclaiming, "Now tell me, I beg you, what goal are we seeking in all these toils of ours? What is it that we desire? What is our motive in public service, being Secret Service agents? Can our hopes bring us higher than to be a friend of the emperor? But how frail and perilous is that? Through what dangers must we climb? And when shall we succeed? But if I choose to become a friend of God, I can become one now." He turned his eyes again to the page of the book and continued reading. He was inwardly changed, and the world dropped away from his mind. Finally, he saw the better course and resolved to it. He said to his friend, "I have broken loose from those hopes we once had. I am determined to serve God, and I intend to that service from this hour in this place. If you are reluctant to imitate me, fine, but do not oppose me." The other replied that he would continue to be bound in friendship, to share in such service for so great price. So both became your servant and began to build the tower, counting the cost, namely of forsaking all that they had and following you. Just like seeing himself in St. Paul in his conversion and Victorinus in his conversion, Augustine sees himself again in this Roman official, as if he was looking at the mirror. Para siyang nakatingin sa salamin. I'm seeing myself in this. And so Augustine prays, while he spoke, you, O Lord, turned me inward toward myself. And as you set me face to face myself, I saw how ugly I was. I saw how crooked I was. I saw how sordid and ulcerous I was. I despised myself. But how to fly from myself? I knew not how. When I tried to turn my gaze away from myself, he would continue his story, and you would thrust me again to look inward and discover my iniquity, and I hate it. Now I knew it, but I winked at it, and I put it behind me. And now the drama of Augustine's turmoil within him goes deeper and deeper. Nahirapan na talaga siya. And so Augustine continues in his prayer, I found myself loving those who had given up themselves completely to you, and at the same time, and at the same time hating myself. It had been 12 years since I read Cicero and was roused with a desire to seek after wisdom. But here I was, still postponing the abandonment of this world's happiness to devote myself to the search. And this is one of Augustine's famous line. Augustine would then say, Lord, give me chastity and self-control. I pray, but not yet. Nahirapan, Lord, gusto ko ito, pero huwag mo na. No, Lord, give me chastity and self-control, but not yet. I was afraid lest you would hear me too soon and too soon cure me of my disease of lust, which I desired to have satisfied, not extinguished. No, powerful words of Augustine. You can now see how the intensity of Augustine's words are, how intense Augustine was in his experience. So Augustine says, I lashed out myself to make it follow you to make it follow after you. You drew it back. Yet it drew back. Now it refused. It would not make any effort. All the arguments were exhausted, yet it resisted a sullen disquiet, fearing the cutting of a habit by which it was being wasted to death. As this intense quarrel was raging inside the chamber of my heart, I cried to Alypius. I said, Oy amigo, what is the matter with us? The instructed take heaven, and we with all our learning stumble in our own flesh and blood. Others have gone before us. Why are we ashamed to follow? I scarcely knew what I said. Alypius gazed at me in silent astonishment. My face, my eyes, my color, my tone, they expressed my meaning more clearly than my words. Grabe na talaga yung drama, no? Sa loob ng heart ni Augustine, ng puso ni Augustine. He was really in a turmoil. Lord, I really want to serve you, but please don't make it happen yet. And so Augustine talks about his struggle. Now, there was a little garden near our lodging. The tempest within drew me out to this garden, where the fiery struggle for life that was engaged in might not be interrupted. I fled into the garden with Alypius following. We sat down as far as from the house as possible. I was greatly disturbed, angry at myself because I had not entered your will and covenant, oh my God, while all my bones cried out for me to enter. But to go on that road is nothing else but the will to go. But it must be a strong and single will, not staggering and swaying about this way and that. A changeable, twisting, fluctuating will, wrestling with itself while one part falls as another rises. Finally, in the fever of my indecision, I tore my hair, striking my forehead, entwining my fingers, clasped my knee. I did this because I willed it. Yet I did not do that one thing which seemed to me infinitely more desirable. As yet I could not do it. Thus my body obeys the slightest wish to move its limbs, but my soul would not obey to accomplish its great resolve. Powerful words from Augustine. I can do a lot of things in life, and yet the best thing that I could do for myself, to serve, to devote myself to you, I still could not do it. So I was at war within myself, or with myself, and I was torn apart by the sin that dwelt within me. I was in torment, reproaching myself more bitterly than ever, struggling in my chain till it showed me till it should be utterly be broken. You, O Lord, pressed upon me in my inmost heart with a severe mercy, redoubling the lashes of fear and shame. I kept saying to myself, let it be done now. Let it be done now. And as I said this, I almost came to a firm decision, almost, but not quite yet. Then I would make a fresh attempt. And now I was almost there, almost there. I was touching the goal, grasping it, and then I was not there, not touching it, not grasping it. I shrank from dying to death and living to life. The nearer it came, that moment when I would be changed, the more it pierced me with terror. Grabe na talaga yung si Agustino. Lord, gusto ko na talaga. I was there. I wanted to do it. And yet, I could not do it. I still could not do it. His left foot was in, and his right foot was still out. And then that's what Augustine was feeling at the time. The struggle raging in my heart was nothing but the contest of self against self. And Alypius kept close beside me and awaited in silence the outcome of my extraordinary turmoil. All the misery within me arose a mighty storm with a mighty rain of tears. I stole away from Alypius, for solitude was more appropriate for the business of weeping. I went far enough away, flung myself under a fig tree, and gave a free course to my tears. Iiyak din pala itong mga santos, no? And so Augustine said, Lord, I cried out to you, how long, O Lord? No, will you be angry with me forever? How long? How long? Tomorrow and tomorrow? Why not now? Why not this very hour make an end to my uncleanness? Grabe na si Augustine, Lord, let's do it now. And Augustine said, as I was weeping and saying these things, I heard the voice of a child coming from the neighboring house, chanting over and over again, take up and read, take up and read. Immediately, I ceased weeping and began to think, what an unusual thing for a child to sing. I have never heard anything like this before. Now, what Augustine is trying here, no, normally we would always hear the same songs from the children, no, mga nursery rhymes. Yeah, mga Jack and Jill went up the hill, you know, or Baba Black Sheep, mga ganon, no? And Augustine heard this line that this kid singing a very different rhyme, like a nursery rhyme. Take up and read. Tole lege, tole lege. And Augustine was wondering, what an unusual thing for a child to sing. I've never heard anything like this before. So I gathered my tears and I got to my feet. How could I not but think that this was a divine command to open the scriptures, the Bible, and read the first passage I should come upon? For I heard how Anthony, accidentally coming into church while the gospel was being read, received the admonition as if what was read in the gospel had been addressed to him. Go and sell what you have and give it to the poor. We know the story of Saint Anthony. He sold everything and gave it to the poor. And Augustine said, by such an oracle, he was immediately converted to you. The moment that Saint Anthony heard the gospel. So, Augustine said, I quickly returned to the bench where Alypius was sitting. It was there that I put down the apostles' book. I snatched it up, opened it, and in silence, I read the paragraph in which my eyes first fell. Romans 13:13. Remember that. Now that's Augustine's line. That's the passage that Augustine read. And it says, not in rioting and drunkenness, not in chambering and wantonness, not in strife and envying, but put on the Lord Jesus Christ and make no provision for the flesh to fulfill the lusts thereof. That was about Augustine's life. And that was precisely the verse that he read. And so Augustine said, I read no further, nor did I need to. For instantly at that moment, there was infused in my heart the light of full certainty, and all the gloom of doubt vanished away. So I hope that when we hear scripture readings, just during the Mass, but when we hear them, listen to God's voice through the words that you hear, to the words that you read. For God is truly sending you a message in the same way as Augustine is telling us. God always sends us a message anywhere, anytime. So closing the book, I began with a peaceful conviction to tell it to Alypius. And he in turn disclosed to me what had been going on with him, of which I knew nothing of. He asked to see what I had read. I showed him, meaning Romans 13:13, and he looked on even further than I had read, meaning the consecutive, the following verses. And I had not known what followed it, and it was this: no, weak in the faith, receive. And this, Alypius applied this to himself immediately. So Alypius was also converted. Then we went to my mother, Monica. Now we go back to the beginning of the story. We went to my mother, Monica, and I told her all that had happened. She leapt for joy, and she blessed you, who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think of. For she saw that you had granted her far more than she had ever asked for in all her weeping about me. And so you converted me to yourself. From that point on, I sought neither a wife nor any other of this world's hopes, but set my feet on that rule of faith, which so many years before you had shown to my mother in her dream about me. And so you turned my mother's grief into a gladness more plentiful. And she never thought possible and dearer than the desire she used to cherish of having grandchildren by flesh. So Augustine's conversion was now complete. In the gospel, my dear friends, now let me stop sharing temporarily. In the gospel, my dear friends, Augustine found something that was infinitely warmer, infinitely deeper, more powerful than all the logic of philosophy and all the traps of worldly lusts and ambition. Christ had satisfied Augustine's longings and inspired this great mind of Augustine to serve God's church and be a shepherd of his flock. The consequence of his conversion was what made him a saint. That he used his gifts, his intellect, for the service of the church. That's why Augustine was one of the fathers of the church, one of the doctors of the church. In fact, he is known as the doctor of grace in the church. And a lot of our teachings in the church were from Augustine himself. And so as we close our reflection tonight, the conversion story of our Holy Father Augustine invites us to make this U-turn and listen to our inner teacher, Christ himself. Like Augustine, we might be looking for Christ outside of us, in the things that we do, in the places that we go to, in the people that we encounter. No, we look for Christ outside of us. But all this time, Nandito lang pala siya sa loob. Now Christ was within us. In Book 10 of the Confessions, Augustine would say, late have I loved thee. No? I was searching for you outside, but all this time, you were within me. We search for him outside. But look, let's make a U-turn and search for Christ within us. It doesn't matter how long you've been traveling in the wrong direction in life. What matters is that you have an opportunity right now to make a U-turn and be on the right direction in life, a direction that would lead us to Christ. We are in the season of Lent. And what's the first word that we hear on Ash Wednesday? Return. Meaning return, make another turn. It's basically a U-turn. To go within us, especially during the season of Lent. This U-turn, be on the right direction in life, and listen to our inner teacher. At the beginning, I mentioned to all of you that the book Augustine wrote, the Confessions, is not about a confession of sins, but rather it is a confession, a profession of the greatness of the greatness of God, of the mercy of God, of the love of God for Augustine. And what Augustine has proven to us in his confessions is that despite everything that we've done to put ourselves going on a direction away from Christ, kahit ano pang gagawin natin, we would never hear from Jesus words of condemnation. Rather, we only hear from Christ words of love, words of mercy, words of compassion. And these words bring to us an invitation to our own conversion. And Jesus assures us that in our journey to our own conversion, he will be there for us. He will always be there with us, journeying with us. So this was the story of Augustine's conversion. A lot of things, you might have picked up a lot of things in the drama of Augustine's life. But all of our lives are always filled with drama. Restlessness. That's why Augustine was known to pray at the beginning of his confessions. Our hearts are restless until they rest in you. There's always drama. There's always things. There are always a lot of things going on in our lives that Augustine would always remind us. But this journey of our own conversion during this season of Lent, let us be mindful now that restlessness is not actually a bad thing. Now, when we think of restlessness, we would always say immediately, "Ako, Padre, restless man ako." Meaning, I'm anxious, I'm filled with anxiety, I don't know what's going to happen to me. My life is too uncertain. And that's what we always associate restlessness with. But what Augustine proves to us here in the Confessions is that restlessness is not really bad at all. Restlessness is really about God's dynamic activity within us. That God is constantly making our hearts restless so that we would always constantly search for him in our lives. Now, in the things that we do, in the people that we meet. And that's why we only find our true rest until we find Christ himself. That's why we're always in this journey of one mind and one heart on the way to God, as Augustine would tell us in the Confessions, teach us in his writings. And so now, I would like us to reflect deeper in silence. This question that I prepared for all of us. Augustine prayed, I delayed my conversion goal. I postponed from day to day the life, but I could not postpone the daily death of myself. I was enamored of a happy life, but I still feared to seek it in its own abode. So I fled from it while I slept. Friends, are you going to allow yourself to be overwhelmed by God's mercy, by God's love, by God's compassion? Yes, we may have put off our conversion to God so many times in our lives, like St. Augustine. Lord, bukas na lang. Lord, mamaya na. Lord, this is not give me another chance. The question is about our own conversion. Can it be done now? No, can it be done now? So let us think deeper, reflect deeper. God's mercy. If we can truly say at this moment, can it be done now? Can it be done now? So we pray. You take over, Lord. Take over our lives. Dust we are, Lord, and remember that from this dust you made us, and that our race once lost was found again. Strengthen me that I may be capable. Give what you command, and then command whatever you will. O holy God, my God, when what you command is done, it is always by your gift. So Lord, take over our lives and our journey to our own conversion. And so may God bless you all, and the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you, everyone. And now I turn over the floor back to Presa.
Thank you so much, Father Richie, for guiding us in our reflection tonight. Our heart is restless until it rests in you. These are powerful words. They direct us towards Christ in a simple way that speaks to everyone, for everyone has a restless heart. The restlessness of spiritual seeking, the restlessness of the encounter with God, the restlessness of love. This restlessness, whether we recognize it or not, is a desire to know God and to have a deeper relationship with Him. None of this is easy, but God is always there for us. Like Saint Augustine, God uses people, things, or situations for us to go back to Him, for us to have a deeper relationship with Him, for us to be dependent to Him because He is God. He is waiting with open arms, just as He waited for Saint Augustine in his conversion to Christianity. Let us be sensitive to God's message to us, so that we too might rest in Him. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. May we request everyone to turn on their cameras for our picture taking.
Turn on your cameras and smile. 1, 2, 3, smile. We have 3 pages. So we have first page, second page, smile. Last page, smile.
Wala ko na-upload picture.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Miss Clay. To continue our spiritual growth in this Lent and beyond, a group chat will be created for all the participants of SRG's 45-day Lenten Recollection. Inclusion and participation in the group chat will be voluntary. Please join us again tomorrow, 8 p.m. Philippine time, here at Zoom or live via the Spring Rain Global Facebook page for the 4th day of Spring Rain Global's 45 Days Lenten Recollection, a Lenten journey of faith in the life of the saints. Tomorrow's topic is a Lenten journey of faith in the life of Saint Artemides Zati. And we will be guided by our reflection by Miss Dami Breeze, spa therapist and deep nature spa. We hope that you will invite your family and friends, and together let us nurture our faith, love, and devotion to the Lord. As we play our closing song, we bid good night to everyone watching from the Philippines and good day to all those watching from the other parts of the world. Thank you and see you again tomorrow. May God bless us.
You have made me for yourself, for you alone, my God, and restless is my heart till it rests in you. You have made me for yourself, for you alone, my God, and restless is my heart till it rests in you. Let me know myself, let me know you, that knowing you, my only God, that I may love you more and more. My God, my only good, you have made me for yourself, for you alone, my God, and restless is my heart till it rests in you. Possess my soul, possess my heart, my mind with it whole being, that I may live for you alone. My God, my only love, you have made me for yourself, for you alone, my God, and restless is my heart till it rests
Thank you, Father Richie.
Welcome. Human na ang recording.